I think we'll start. So thank you so much, Maithili, for joining us today. And I'm so excited that you're a fellow Pune person and a fellow UL alumni who lives in Pune, which is incredibly hard to find. So thank you so much. Maithili has finished her graduation from CSM and she did her MA in narrative environment. And I'm going to allow her to introduce herself completely and appropriately. So over to you, Maithili.
Okay, just give me a minute to share
Sure.
screen. Yeah. So hi, I'm Maithili, and what I think what my practice makes me is a spatial storyteller. Because what I like to do is tell stories through the medium of space. And I started off as an architect, and after completing architecture, I worked with a firm that did museum design. And I really liked that whole aspect of it, the exhibition design, the content driven conceptual kind of work. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. So that's still something I continue to do, design museums and exhibitions. And within that whole bigger process, sorry, this won't go. Um, Give me a second. Okay. So within the whole exhibition design thing, what I really enjoyed doing was interpretation design. And essentially what that is after you're done with all of your research and you have all the content and the data points, what I really like uh, doing and enjoy the most is finding out those connections between the content and figuring out what the sequence of those data points should be to kind of create the most engaging narratives. And while you're doing that, you have to constantly think about the angles, the connotations that you're talking about, what story you're weaving when you're putting all of these content points together. So that's something that I really, really enjoy doing. Um, you're also thinking of who the audience is and how you're creating the most engaging experience for them. So when I looked at courses at CSM and when I decided to do narrative environments, I thought that I was going there to kind of become to find more knowledge in this particular niche that I had found for myself, and that was interpretation design within the cultural and museum space. But when I went and did the course, what I realized was that apart from weaving the narrative, to limit myself to just say I'm going to do museums was just limiting to one medium of communication. So the telling part of it, which was communicating the narrative, could be through various mediums. It need not always be exhibitions. It could be public installations, it could be performances, it could be board games. And that's the freedom that I really enjoyed. So what the course gave me and my practice after the course has been to kind of let the story tell me or the audience tell me what the telling or the medium should be and not constrict myself to just exhibitions. So that's where I'm at right now, where I still love doing interpretation design, but it's also open to trying to find out what suits that story the best. So currently, I've worked on a lot of scales and a lot of kind of projects. So I've done exhibition design for the British Museum while I was in London. Currently, the project that I'm working on is a large museum the on Jainism, but this one kind of focuses on the philosophy of it and not looking at religions from the ritualistic point of view. So it's to tell the youth what the crux of that philosophy is and how it's relevant to today's times. So it's more for targeted towards the youth who are moving away from anything related to religion. So it's a very, it uses immersive mediums, it uses modern technology, and it's a very new way to talk about religion and the culture and the history. And that's kind of what my day job is currently. But it also was about doing design strategy for Unite Student Accommodation when they came to us and they wanted to rebrand their whole experience, and they wanted to know what the story should be for them. What are they communicating to the students that are coming there? So it was more of a strategy program for what they should be looking at, what would the people expect from them, and how can that be translated into the space and the facilities that they offer. And then going on to an even bigger scale, I've also been involved in a couple of urban placemaking projects where the entire city becomes, the narrative is for the whole city, and you try and figure out how you're going to tell that story through different parts of the city, where they want installations, whether how is the city branding itself, and how is the city telling its story. So it's really a lot of scale and a lot of diversity, and that is what my current practice is. But today, I want to take you through a couple of projects that are mostly smaller research projects and pop-up installations, but they're stories that are really close to my heart and something that I'm really passionate about. So the first exhibition was called Moving Stories. And this was in London, where the Camden Council kind of approached us about this small part of Camden called Somers Town. And they realized that the obesity levels in this particular space were a lot higher than the average. And they realized that their clipboard surveys are not doing the job, and they're not finding out what the reasons are or what the residents were looking for. So they came to us because they wanted us to think of new engagement tools and creative ways of research where we can actually collect qualitative stories and talk to people and get those layers and details through the conversations about what they really wanted and what was missing from the space. And then eventually it had to be, the end result was an interactive exhibition where we show these results and portray these stories and talk about our findings. So this project was important because we really went all out and did crazy amounts of research, we did pop-up installations where we dressed as chefs, and we asked them which, the activity soup, we called it, and we asked them which activities would they like to put into the soup. Or we asked them to make their own platter of food to understand what are the food choices they're having. So the learnings from this project were quite a bit. We realized that the context in the space kind of sets the tone for the conversations you're having. As soon as they see you in a formal suit with your clipboards, the conversations you're going to have are very different from something that you do out of place, which is weird. They're looking at you and trying to figure out what's happening here. And that's kind of very engaging and welcoming to the people. And that really has an effect on the conversations and the stories that you're going to have. Also the designing of these props of physical tactile elements that they can play with while they're telling you. So we did these maps with flags on it, or cards with messages on it, and things like that really help in getting that kind of the content. And that playful side of things is something that I think I've continued throughout my projects, because that I believe is really important to my practice, that idea of play, even if the content that you're dealing with is pressing issues, the way you're talking about it can still be playful and engaging. So this is what it resulted in. We decided to focus on the activities that these residents were doing. And we decided to focus on 4 aspects of it. What is the activity? Why are they doing it? Where would they like to do it? And how would they like to be communicated about it? Because one of the insights was that the bigger gap was in the communication of the activities that the council was doing for them. And they weren't reaching that aspect to the residents. So through these conversations, what we did was create these activity portraits. So every box that you see is basically an activity portrait of one resident of the town. And he's talking about the wishes that they want for these activities, what the council should be doing. And also to get individually, they're a story of a person, but together they're also making a bigger picture of what the colony of these social housing people need in terms of activities. And while doing that, one of the things that we was important was also to keep it contextual. So why is this contextual to Somerstown, where it was from? So we did board games which were inspired from the map of Somerstown. So they had smaller nuggets that they could find on the board game, which was their local grocery store or the underground station or the park that they frequent. So it was very relatable. Also, in terms of figuring out the exhibition graphics, we kind of went and took pictures of all the windows and the facades of this locality and made that into the bigger visual. So even when the blocks are placed, it kind of mimics this social housing of these individual people coming together and forming these facades. Another learning from that was that this became a great conversation starter amongst the residents itself. So apart from all the research that happened, there were neighbors that had never met or conversations between them. So the social engagement aspect of it was also um, achieved through this project and exhibit. The next one is called Women in a Box.
I'm sorry, can I ask you a question here before
Yes,
we move ahead?
please.
Do you think that the way you guys researched and worked on the project that you were showing us right now, is that something that is possible to do in India and to plan a neighborhood or to plan a space out like that? Do you think we can manage to achieve it at some point?
On a smaller scale, I feel for sure. So in terms of actually getting that data and doing all of that kind of research, it would be really interesting to do it in a space in India, and I think it's possible wherever. Um, Actually going to the authority and the implementation side of it, because with this project, the council came to us and they understood what we were doing was important for them. I think here it would be the struggle of also convincing the authorities of how it's important for them. So I don't know how much that would be a struggle in terms of putting it into action. But I'm sure the project like this would be possible in terms of actually understanding what the people need or want from these very multidisciplinary research technique, out of the box research
Yeah, I mean, we do
techniques.
have Chandigarh technically, right? So Chandigarh was something that
Yeah,
was planned
yeah,
and built.
yeah. But then it's also about trying to make better what's existing, and that I think is more difficult uh, to do in the current scenario. So yeah, so this one was called Women in a Box, and it was a pop-up installation which was in the form of a picnic. And it was about these self-portraits of women talking about their utopias and their dreams, which was basically a reaction to what issues they're facing or are important to them, and what are the biases and the societal pressures that they're facing. So we did a toolkit where we interviewed these women. We spoke about their everyday life, their hopes, aspirations, dreams, um, and we asked them to create a utopia. What was their utopic world? What did it look like? So it was an alternative future of sorts, and it was a commentary on the struggles that they faced every day. And the installation took the form of this picnic where each woman was basically a set of cutlery that you see on the placemat. And all the issues that we discussed were these red road signs, which also, when someone walked by, was their first point of really getting interested in what these words are and what is this installation about. Um, so we interviewed women and we asked them to talk about their stories, their utopias, and it was almost poignant in a way because the issues that came up were so simple that you had to question yourself about why they were not a reality and why was that someone's utopia. Another thing that I realized during this project was that we spoke to a lot of women from a lot of different backgrounds, age groups, countries, and the themes that they spoke about and the issues they spoke about, even though the context was different, kind of at the core of it still remained the same. So even a woman in London versus a woman in India still spoke about objectification, still spoke about societal pressures, breaking the glass ceiling. So the issue still remained constant in spite of the spaces and all the boundaries that we were looking at. The third is called Crossroads, and this is the one that we did in Bombay just before lockdown. And this was an event for an event that was about climate change and sustainability. And what we decided to do was create like a card game experience about consequences and choices. So what we wanted people to do was think about what choices they're making today and how it's affecting their future world. Another aspect that me and Ankita, who I worked with on the project, are really interested is speculative fiction. So kind of extrapolating the trends of today and creating this fictional world, which still is very rooted to the present. So you think it's fiction, but it also makes you think, but are we heading there? Is it possible? So what we asked them to do was basically choose a world that they were living in, and we gave them categories like technology, health, infrastructure, education, governance. And within each category, we had created these 4 plausible futures, and they had to select the one that they thought they were the most convinced with, or that is the path that we're heading towards. And after they create these worlds, when they have 4 cards together, we ask them to write that down and create their own future world. And we put them up on this cross axis that we created at the back, which was the health of the planet versus the health of the society. And that was essentially to start a conversation about whether these two are at crossroads. What extreme are we living at? Can we try to converge at the center? Um, and generally, what life are we living and what are we heading towards? And when we did this, we thought that at least on the face, people will be really optimistic, and there'll be only one quadrant that is filled to a large extent. But towards the end of the night, we realized that there were people who thought we're heading towards doomsday and we're going to be eating each other up, and so it was really dark and negative, and also equally optimistic about working towards a balanced world. So that's what this one was about. And this I just want to touch upon because it was also similar in the sense that we created 4 different cities and 4 universes, again related to the future. But it was the telling of it was very different in the sense that the previous one was cards, while this became a sort of a board game where you pick blocks up and you find that story and figure out which city you belong to. So we had cities like Cognicity and Harmonicity, and so there was each city that signified something that was central to them, and they choose which one they want to talk about. And this project was called the Ministry of the Worthless Other, because it was about how not having conversations and just going for one or the other is kind of pulling each other apart, and how extremism is something we need to fight against. So this was just to show that even at the crux of the story is the same, depending on the audience, depending on where it's going to be placed, the telling or the medium of communication can be really, really distinct and different. And that's something that I enjoy doing. So yeah, so if I were to talk about my practice, a lot of people, when we did the climate change and sustainability event, asked us whether we were subject experts in climate change and sustainability. But at the core of it, we're not. We're passionate about it. But what I would like to be an expert at is telling a story. And once you tell me what it's about, I'll research about it. I'll make sure that I know what I'm saying. But the crux is not about the subject, but the way in which we're telling the stories. So it's about amplifying unheard stories. It's about understanding the subtext and the undercurrents and kind of bringing it to the forefront and talking about these narratives that you don't usually see in today's world. So it's about telling stories that appeal to me, that I think that's important, that I believe in them, because that changes in a way subconsciously the design that you do and the passion that you feel for that project. So I feel like I need to truly believe in the stories that I'm telling. I'm also very sure of the fact that the projects or the experiences that I'm designing are not solution giving experiences. It's about starting conversations. It's about encouraging introspection. So even if one person left that experience asking themselves where they're leading, or if it stayed with them for the next couple of days and they're thinking about that, then that's the aim of the experience. It's not about showcasing problems or saying you need to do this or you need to do that and preach a solution, just so to say. But it's really about making them think and start conversations about issues that are relevant today. So yeah, so that was very quickly what I do and the projects that really interest me and where I want to head in the future.
I think that's absolutely amazing. I mean, in fact, it's a great one to have after today morning's talk, right? We keep saying, see, I practice fashion, and very often we're told that design is so like, what's the big deal in it? But I think it has such a lot of power to be able to
Absolutely.
connect people, tell stories, find ways that we can look for solutions. If not have the ultimate solution, then try and look for them.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think it was very interesting, and I really wish we could actually go deeper into each project, because I think it'd be great to see how people respond to different things that you guys are doing. But I'd like to open it up, and if anyone has any particular questions, we can take them right now.
I'm interested in knowing what were the things for women, like the utopia dialogues that came up, which were actually should have been very normal for women.
It was a lot about, so a few of them were about walking safely at night, and that it was as simple as that. Or some of it was about objectification and not being judged for what they're wearing. Or it was something as simple as, I remember one person's utopia, which was my favorite, was it's happened to me a lot of times when I'm thinking and I'm looking a little sad. There are men who've come to me and said, you need to smile a little, no, cheer up. And there was this utopia where I want to be just the way I am and I don't need to be told to cheer up. So it was something as simple as that to something as serious as making career choices and changing their life decisions because they were a woman. So yeah, so it was a range of issues that we had. I think we had about 10 to 15 portraits of these women, and yeah, it spoke about that.
You had a word in that same project called othering, which was there in
Yes.
Can you just tell me about that word a little bit?
So othering is basically when you put a group of people into a separate a group and say
For the
that you
others.
don't agree with them and you push them away. So it basically breeds extremism and creates these echo chambers because you're pushing them away and stopping conversation. So as soon as you say that these guys are different and I don't want to relate to them and I don't want to talk to them, that's when problems start. So being placed in a separate box and not having that conversation is something that they spoke about. In this project particularly, we used a lot of these big words and we didn't know whether it would be a deterrent, but actually it worked quite the other way, because there were a lot of people who saw these words and the first conversation they had was exactly, what does this mean,
Right.
So it actually worked more to as conversation starters to engage with the whole installation.
Do you think also sometimes, like when you interact with people like this, you realize that the simplest ideas, the simplest thoughts are what normally like escape us, which we don't even end up thinking that they're relevant because they're so small. But then you start to realize everyone has these small thoughts and that's why they're so big.
Yeah.
So I think that's really fascinating to understand, like, because, and again, very often than not, we say, oh, if it's simple, it's, it's not important, but also like the simplest form of design sometimes is the most beautiful. And you go like, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
So I think that's
and you're also, you are facing them as well, but you're not thinking about them, maybe because it's normalized or, it's not important to you. But when you hear them is also when you start realizing things about yourself or reflecting about how they're also connected to you. So, yeah.
Great. Any more questions? Okay, I think, Mamta, do you want to unmute yourself and speak? Maybe that would be better. I don't think she can hear me. Mamta? Okay, so I think she's saying that there's a project that is a great case study. So if someone's interested, they can actually look this up. It's okay, no problem. You can just look this up, this project that Mamta has mentioned in the chat, and probably like look through it to see what she's talking about.
I will.
Yeah.
I've heard so much about Mamta, but we've never spoken or never really.
And clearly you can't now because she's got crappy internet, so that's not going to happen still. But hopefully when we do this
But
again,
we'll connect
like,
offline. Yeah.
We should do that. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was great. It was a great experience.
Thank you. Thank you. We have our next talk at, Open Studio at 2 o'clock with Studio C9 with Shobna and Praveen. So please do join us back here at 2 o'clock. Thank you so much.